It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The 5. The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee facing new pressure to recuse himself from the probe into Russia's election meddling as President Trump attempts to shift the panel's focus to the Clintons. More on that in just a moment. Democrats are calling for Devin Nunes to remove himself from the Russia investigation following news that he reviewed intelligence material on the Trump team on White House grounds and then went back to speak about it to the president. Fellow committee member Jackie Speier goes even further. She thinks that he should step down as chairman.
If you become a White House whisperer, you are not being independent. And I think he has tainted the committee. I'm asking for him to step down in the interests of what we all care about, which is the integrity of our intelligence community.
Meanwhile, Nunes maintains that he has done nothing wrong.
Why not recuse yourself from this investigation?
I still don't know why. If you guys give me a reason to recuse myself, I might consider it.
Your critics say you're just too close to the Trump administration to lead this investigation.
Yeah, I don't know that they've actually said that. But
and will you share your source, reveal your source to all members of the committee?
We will never reveal sources.
But you're confident you can still credibly lead this investigation?
Yeah, this is look, this is politics. I understand that, and people have to play the different sides that they want to play, but which is okay. I'm used to it.
The chairman says he won't recuse himself from the Russia probe, and Speaker Ryan doesn't think he should either. Here's the White House reaction today.
It's not up to me. He's a member of the House. He's appointed by the Speaker. I do think that he is running an investigation, which we asked for. There's somewhat of a double standard when it comes to classified information. You all report on stuff with sources that are illegally leaking classified information. That's appropriate and fine. No one questions that, the substance of the material. When two individuals or however many are engaged in this process have a discussion that is 100% legal and appropriate and cleared, suddenly the obsession becomes about the process and not the substance.
All right, so Kennedy, I was away for one day and this story grew more legs. I don't know what to do here. It just keeps going. And I feel like the White House, they want to get away from it. And then the president tweets about it. And we actually have his tweet here where he said about the Clintons. And why isn't there an investigation into the Clintons and any money that they would have taken from Russia? So it's trying to do well, what about them?
Okay, you're absolutely right, because a spider's only supposed to have 8 legs, and this one has turned into a centipede. But the thing is, just because you sprout some new limbs doesn't give you reason to amputate all the others. And, there may be reason to look at the Clintons, absolutely. And I think the president's right when he talks about those curious Bill Clinton speaking fees from the Russian bank that had very interesting timing with the uranium deal that Hillary Clinton rubber-stamped when she was Secretary of State. But having said that, Devin Nunes has, I think, done a really bad job of explaining himself, and he has allowed the story to consume him. And as you know, having been in a post where you really have to control a large part of the message, he's let the message get away from him, and that allows for more suspicion. And I think, there are some important questions that are not being asked by either party, and that is, were civil liberties violated? Was the law violated in the gathering of intelligence that was either untoward or illegal? And I think that's a question we deserve an answer to, and we're looking in the wrong places.
Well, there's really 3 pieces of the investigation, Eric. There's the meddling from Russia into the U.S. election. There's the allegations of collusion and an investigation about the Trump campaign and people from Russia. And then there's the unmasking and the leaking issue. So there are actually 3 issues. Where do you think this goes from here? Because there was going to be a hearing, then there wasn't going to be a hearing. Then there's questions about whether Sally Yates, the former Deputy Attorney General who was fired by President Trump, was going to be allowed to testify. The White House disputes a Washington Post report. And I'm just trying to figure out, where do we go tomorrow?
It's been a flurry of news going back and forth. But again, here we're talking about whether or not Devin Nunes is capable of presiding over a committee investigation, and I think he is. You may not like him. You may not like the fact that he met his source at the White House, but the bottom line is we're going to see most of that. We're going to see the testimony by most of these people. Some of it happens behind closed doors, but it's not just Nunes deposing various people. There's bipartisan representation in these things. I think he is capable of doing it, but the more controversy, the more questions surrounding why did he get out of a cab? I think you're right. You're pushing the Democrats to give you a reason to say, hey, independent counsel, when you really don't need it, because it's all going to come out when we watch all the testimony. Yates claimed, or someone claimed that she wasn't allowed to testify, and then they produced, I think, or John Roberts produced a letter that was sent to Yates, and the lawyer responding back saying that she was in fact notified of this testimony. And I think also, there was supposed to be some testimony yesterday that got pushed off so that Comey and Rogers could testify. They said they weren't going to show up, so that all got delayed. And I think in the confusion, you're right. It's time. Let's just have this hearing. Let's get these people on the Hill.
Well, right. And the other question is if Representative Nunes needed to go to the White House to meet somebody, why doesn't that somebody that's working in the White House call the White House counsel's office or the president and say, I have something I really feel I need to show you? Because then the next day, Nunes goes back to the White House, and then after he tells the press about it, not telling his colleagues on the committee, and briefs the president on what he heard. What do you make of that?
I kind of lost what you were saying there for a minute.
I've followed it perfectly well.
I didn't know. It stinks to high heaven, Dana. This conspiracy stinks to high heaven. Who supplied Nunes with the intelligence? Ted Cruz's dad. As a way to deflect the media from Pizzagate, which is actually harboring President Obama's long-form birth certificate. It's all comes around. Here's the deal. He's guilty. Nunes is guilty of premature accusation.
Oh, dear.
He should have waited. He should have waited a while before he actually had the information. If he held back, we wouldn't have had this problem. And now everybody's running around, and we don't know a lot of the answers. No. So we're spending all this time speculating. Meanwhile, to me, I go back to watching the media. It's amazing how they're tearing into this story like a pit bull. There's salivating because there's chum in the water. But where were they? Again, where were they when you talk about the IRS or the DOJ or Benghazi? This is why people hate the media, because they're selectively investigating. They are selectively being Woodward and Bernstein. They're now hot on a story because they don't like the president, whereas there were a lot of really great stories that went on in the last 8 years that weren't covered. Lastly, I want to point out that there's both sides are guilty, I think, of this. When the Democrats say Russian collusion, the Republicans say, where's the evidence? When the Republicans say deep state mutiny and illegal leaks, the libs say, where's the evidence? It's like when you play rock, paper, scissors, and everybody keeps going this. It's like it just keeps going on, so just have the investigation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No paper.
Yeah.
Paper covers rock. Bob, do you think that the Democrats really want this to go to an independent counsel or special prosecutor? Because, as you know, as soon as that happens, everything goes very quiet.
Yeah,
and then President Trump would be able to drive more on his agenda and not have to worry about it.
We don't have to worry about that. By the way, I think that since he wants to blame the Kennedys, I think we should go back and investigate why there were not more Secret Service at Lincoln's assassination. It's very important. Look, the fact of the matter is that Nunes went way out of line. Nobody would not at least tell their co-chairman what's going on. The other thing that Spicer said in his inimitable way of screwing everything up, he said, and it was cleared. He said it was cleared. The last thing he said, it was legal, it was something, and it was cleared, which means somebody cleared this guy in, called his
well, you
cab.
can't get into the White House without getting it.
Yeah, but somebody cleared him in at that hour of the night when he's coming off of a cab, coming in there and then going to supposedly some secret room and then trotting in behind his master and telling him what he's got on. Excuse me, can I finish?
But you're right about the first part, but then you make this leap that no one knows and will only come out in a testimony under oth.
Okay.
You said you're right. Yes, he needs to be cleared to get in. That doesn't mean he met with the person who cleared him.
Okay, excuse. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I finish?
Please.
Please. Thank you very much. Now I forgot what I was going to say. No, the fact of the matter is that this has now everybody can agree on was a result of the taping or intercepts of 2 foreign nationals. And people got caught up in that. Anybody within a half-mile range of an intercept is going to get caught up in it. Thousands of people get caught up in it. Now, the only question is, why were they named? Now, that, I think, is a legitimate question that ought to be answered. But Nunes not only should drop out of being a committee member, he ought to get out of Congress and get himself a good criminal lawyer.
So all you do is you take someone chatty you know, someone like Sergei Kislyak, who's like
Who?
the uncool guy trying to get into Studio 54.
The ambassador.
He's the Russian ambassador who has
He
been
got killed in Studio 54, you know. He did. He was given a
and
certain kind of-
reanimated by Vladimir
and it was the
Putin's
Trump
missing in a
administration
can.
that did it, yeah.
Yeah. Anyhow.
But and you can't, you know, you can't say, oh, by the way, they may have named those guys. The unmasking, illegally unmasking Americans, names could be like very, very serious crimes.
It could be.
Very serious
That's-
crimes.
Well, but the other thing that
Attaching these Americans in the
up
first
to 10
place.
years imprisonment for doing that if they did it illegally.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. But the question is it illegal if you're doing a sidebar investigation on Russia?
No.
That the name comes up, that you could turn it over to the people?
Once you unmask them, though, that's the illegal act right there.
Well, one of the
President
things that
Obama
the
made that a lot
one of the things that chairman said is that some of them, the names weren't unmasked, but that he could tell who it was because he worked on the transition. And
Well,
he
yeah,
knows
because
these
he's
people.
he's a
That
puppy
doesn't-
dog
I don't think that's the same
for
thing as
Bulldog
unmasking.
Trump.
I mean, it might be sloppy in terms of the hiding of the names, but what do you
No,
think?
that's like someone who's an Angela Lansbury fan watching Murder, She Wrote and figuring out the ending of the show in the first 7 minutes.
You too.
Did that annoy you?
Yes.
You're so good. You were so good at it.
I say this once a week. I'll say it again. The big winner is always going to be Putin. The longer this circus goes on, the harder the shirtless man on a lion laughs. And then he is a global stink bomb. And right now he's in his underwater fortress, rubbing his hands.
Oh, right now he has sending troops
Greg,
into Libya.
Greg, you mentioned the IRS investigation or something along this line.
Yes.
This allegation, if it's true that Putin and the Russians somehow got WikiLeaks to get this stuff out, is the worst single atrocious thing another country could do to another. It's worse than war. And,
Okay, but-
and we'll unmask Putin for what he is. He's a thug, he's an autocrat, and he ought to be gone too.
But Dick Cheney
Too bad I
said-
don't believe in capital punishment.
I can't believe you're agreeing with Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney said that this is an act of war.
It certainly is.
I mean,
it certainly
It technically is.
Yeah, again, you have, factions within the Republican
If
Party.
you have
those who
people
are-
around Putin who contacted WikiLeaks and said, leak that stuff, it's an act of war, and it also will ruin Trump, and it should.
Well, okay. It could be, as Trump says, a hoax designed as payback for the Democrats' humiliating loss, or it could be a massive scandal, like Bill's saying, an act of war by Russia to destroy a very republic, or it could be a bit of both, which is the answer. C, it's a bit of both. It's never one extreme or the other. It's somewhere in the middle.
And can we also point out it's been going on for decades and upon
Between who?
decades. The Russians trying to influence and hack into our election. However, per the intel community saying, yes, they've tried, but yes, they've been doing it for decades, and no, it had no effect on the outcome of the election.
They said that they have been always truly intercepting us. We're intercepting them, but they've never tried to use a third party to discourage people from voting for another person.
How did they do that? With fake news?
With the WikiLeaks letting all those emails
Yeah, but
go.
what about the emails that we got from the State Department?
Which ones?
Because of the Hillary Clinton investigation.
What about
her
it?
server investigation. I mean, are you saying that the Podesta emails were somehow more damning than the emails we saw?
absolutely.
I disagree, and I don't think you
The
can
risotto
completely-
recipe was bad.
It was awful. I tried to make it. Porcini mushrooms do not hold up with heavy cream. Just saying.
And my new rule is no one that works in news should ever say, whoa, if true. Just don't do it ever again. All right, ahead. Should social media companies like Facebook do more to help fight terror when they have the capability to do so? Greg makes a very strong case for it when the live returns.
Back in the days of world wars, American companies didn't think twice about pitching in to help fight the enemy. Car companies helped bolster tanks. Food companies created rations. Sometimes they had to do it, but no one had to twist their arm. Unlike today, consider the internet firm WhatsApp, owned by Facebook. It was the communication tool used by the terrorists in last week's attack in London. So what if your product, during a time of war, happened to help out the enemy? It's not your fault. But why must we pressure you to help? British Home Secretary Amber Rudd is calling WhatsApp out for giving the enemy a place to hide after security services failed to access the terrorist's last message, which was sent minutes before he killed those innocent people. Something tells me he wasn't texting emojis to his pet goat. WhatsApp lets users send end-to-end encrypted messages, which are sealed off so Scotland Yard can't access what could be a key clue. Now, safe in Menlo Park, California, it may be hard for a CEO to imagine his family being victims on that bridge last week. But why not try? If one clue prevents the deaths of loved ones, those loved ones could one day be yours. Here's a fact. If Facebook were a religion, it would be the third largest, behind Islam and Christianity. Its success is rooted in capitalizing on the human desire to bond. So if you made billions of dollars off connecting them, maybe the least you could do is help keep them from being blown apart. The thing that drives me nuts, Dana,
Yes.
is I know it's not Google's fault or Facebook's fault or Twitter's fault. They're all probably really wonderful people. But why do you have to, these days, pressure people to cooperate?
I don't know. I mean, we go through this over and over again, and I don't know why there can't be some sort of a resolution or memorandum of understanding between the companies and law enforcement, because this really is, at this point, you have to say, are you standing then with the terrorists? So remember, you're either with us or against us.
Right.
But I was thinking also about video cameras. So if let's say that he had gone in and bought something beforehand, or we've seen many convenience store camera footage that led us to clues to figure out what happened in a crime.
Yeah.
They turn it over.
Yeah.
But I don't understand why then WhatsApp thinks that that's any different.
Yeah,
what benefits them? I understand privacy. I get the privacy part, but at some point, my right for privacy, it should be possibly superseded by my right to be protected against somebody who is planning an attack.
I think you can have both. And Eric, I don't understand why the war on terror is somehow different from fighting the Nazis. Like it's because it's global and it's harder to grab. I don't know what it is.
I would agree with that part of it. And again, this is going to be one of those philosophical discussions that we have that maybe, I don't know, you and I, listen, a lot of people don't like my stance on this. But if you ask WhatsApp to turn over, to break their encryption, you've basically told them you're going out of business. And then you talk about, all the other end-to-end encrypted websites to go out of business. Now, yes, I understand this whole security versus safety issue. The Constitution does say until you're a target or there's a court that says you're a target, you're supposed to be able to keep your privacy. So here's the sliding line. Yes, terrorism. Everyone would agree. If it's terrorist, open this up, find out who did it and why and how. Well, does murder fall in the same category? Okay, fine, maybe it does. Does rape? Does kidnapping? What about car theft? What about cheating on your spouse? Someone has to draw that line, and unless there's a lot.
Well, all those things were crimes until you got to cheating on your spouse.
But my point is, it becomes it becomes a gray area on which crimes, which things do you want to break open your right to privacy?
I think if there's a murderer on the loose, it's enough. But Kenny, what do you think?
I think actually WhatsApp is showing how good their technology really is. And then they're doing a service to their customers because they realize this is a company like Apple in the San Bernardino case. They are not going to fold to this pressure. Now, what we saw from Facebook is a statement saying, no, we absolutely are doing whatever we can to work with Scotland Yard. And we feel for the victims of this tragedy and, of course, of all acts of terrorism. And by the way, these companies, these big tech companies regularly work with law enforcement and they honor warrants. So it's not as though they've built a terrorist-loving wall in Silicon Valley. What they have built is technology that's so good that their customers want is real encryption that they can't break, they have no desire to break, and their customers see that they are true to their word. And there are a lot of companies who would go out of business rather than kowtow to government demands. The reason people want this kind of privacy, the reason people want this kind of security is because they don't trust the government in the first place, and they don't buy into the false notion that somehow the world is safer when you have less privacy.
But okay, I get your point. It's almost like electricity. People use electricity for good, they use it for bad. But in this case, if you know that there are people doing evil things and you have their device, what's wrong with not cooperating and figuring out how to get into it?
Well, I agree. But first, I'd like to say this is the 5 at 5 o'clock, and this is the 15th time in a row I've been asked the 5th question. Okay. Let me put it this way. If you can waterboard terrorists, you can waterboard the people who run that company and find out. I have no sympathy for them whatsoever. I understand what Eric is saying. There has got to be a way for them to set up a monitoring device in their own company to look at certain messages that may or may not, say they're in countries like England, which has been subjected to a lot of terrorist attacks. Why not have something they could put together that filters out those countries and then informs people like Scotland Yard? I don't understand it, and it is almost, in my view, almost unpatriotic.
You can subpoena actual text and information. What they're asking for, though, is that backdoor. And Kennedy points out the iPhone case where Apple said, we're not going to give the FBI the backdoor into this iPhone, this terrorist iPhone, because once you do that, you've ruined our product. You basically deemed our product unnecessary.
Yeah.
Then it becomes just like any other phone. So, look, terror may be your line in the sand. Stealing from a corner bodega may be someone else's line in the sand. That's why it becomes a very slippery slope until you violated. I mean, you have to protect people's privacy. You have to protect innocent people's privacy.
The interesting thing is you need a free society in order to create and invent great products. If you have an existential terrorist group that wants to end your civilization, you will not have your GD freedom that allows you to make these wonderful devices.
And you ought to stop ripping up bodegas. Okay?
They'll exist after WhatsApp, but that's the thing. And there are other ways of using intelligence to capture these people and figure out what they're doing, aside from encrypted chat services, including, a lot of sites that there are conservatives and liberals who want to shut them down. They want to shut down Twitter and even Pinterest.
Not Pinterest.
I'll give you one quick example. If you think a terrorist is hiding in a neighborhood, and you know he's in the neighborhood, you don't know which house it is, the easiest way to do is kick down every single door in the neighborhood. You can't do that either, because there are innocent people who aren't harboring terrorists who don't deserve to have their door kicked down.
That's why you can look at the phone of the other terrorist that was killed and go, he lives on 13 Elm Street.
Who decides which phones get
I'll do it.
cracked?
I'll decide. I'm happy. I got the free time, Kennedy. I can do it when I get home after the 5. All right, ahead, Sanctuary City mayors fire back at the Trump administration, vowing to continue defying our nation's immigration laws. That's next.
President Trump met with a group of law enforcement officials today at the White House and pledged to work alongside them to make America safe again.
Highest duty as president is the security of our people, the security of our nation. That is why I've already taken numerous actions to enhance domestic security, including the creation of task force on reducing violent crime, an interagency task force to dismantle criminal cartels, along with historic actions to secure our borders and remove criminals from our country.
Removing illegals who have committed crime is a top priority for the president, and any local governments that won't turn them over to the feds will have face their funding to be cut off. His attorney general issued another direct warning to sanctuary states and cities yesterday, but mayors like Chicago's Rahm Emanuel remain defiant.
You're looking at a person who's a grandson of an immigrant to the city of Chicago 100 years ago in 1917. My grandfather came to Chicago 13 years old, because it was a welcoming city, and we're still going to be and always will be a welcoming city, whether you're an immigrant from Poland or Pakistan, Ireland or India, or Mexico or Moldova, where my grandfather came. If you believe in the American dream, we welcome you to the city of Chicago.
Yeah. Okay, Bobby, you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. First of all, what Trump said about task forces for the last 15 years, it's become a safer and safer country. That's one thing. Hey, this guy ought to go to history classes. I mean, it's unbelievable. And secondly, what we need is a new task force. What we need is not to have his attorney general say yesterday, we're going to cut off federal funding for law enforcement, exactly the kind of people you need to take care of the people who are criminals, who are illegals. Now, I happen to be for doing all that. I am not for ripping a woman who has got cancer out of a hospital, even if she wasn't that sick, and then her kid's waiting for her back in New York. That is sick, and it's a thug, and you ought to be put in jail.
Okay,
can we put
that story? We've been taking care of that woman for quite some time, and we're still taking care of her. She's getting 24-hour round-the-clock.
Good.
By the way, since I'm already yakking?
Yeah, but can I just point one more thing about Bob pointing out that, by the way, This started under President Obama, who wanted to earmark education funding for deportation.
You said that yesterday. I agree with you. Right? Bowling against sanctuary cities, but in favor of a sanctuary app in the last block.
It's reading its way. Greg, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I love the disconnect. You have a mayor of a city where the primary aerobic exercise is ducking bullets. Announcing that it's a welcoming city. That's like the captain of the Titanic asking the people in the lifeboats to come back in for a drink. And also, the one argument that always comes up is that sanctuary cities are there to allow illegal aliens out of the shadows to report crimes. This is reiterated by everybody. I can't find the statistics. I haven't seen a statistic that says illegal aliens as a group are dependable sources of information for police. If somebody gives me that, and I have a feeling Kennedy might, I don't know, then I will say yes, but I haven't been able to find it.
Can I just bring Dane in on Rahm Emanuel? I mean, is he the guy that should be pitching this idea?
Well, what he said was that he's proud to stand with 34 other cities and states, and so there is a caucus, so to speak. So it's not the biggest one. The federal government uses funding as a carrot and stick approach, right? So taking away the law enforcement would be the severe stick, whereas education funding might not have quite done it for them. What I don't understand, and I just maybe need more education about this, is that Rahm Emanuel went on to say that the administration's plan to deny federal funds to cities that are standing up for their values is unconstitutional. And that part I don't understand, how it is unconstitutional for the federal government to be able to decide.
All this is going to be in the courts. They're never going to do it.
But what is the constitutional harm?
I don't know, but it's going to be in the courts.
Yeah, and what is the obligation of the federal government to be funding cities in the first place? I agree with you that I don't think that we should be withholding funding from law enforcement, particularly if the argument is that crime is going up. I don't think you can necessarily say it's only because of illegal immigrant criminal activity, but I will say, to your point, that oftentimes immigrants are a very valuable source of intelligence for law enforcement.
The FBI.
And when you go into communities, especially local cops, they have to be able to talk to people and get information. My brother was a cop for a long time, and we talked about this, adding an extra layer.
Anecdotal evidence, Kennedy.
No, it's
I'm
not.
disappointed in you.
I'll allow it.
But here's what I will say. Oftentimes we fall, when we're talking about the war on terror, there's not enough human intelligence. That's something they could learn from local police departments who really go out, canvass these communities, and find
FBI has reported 15 years straight decline in violent crime.
Yes.
I have one last final quick point, which is one of the best things about being in power at the White House is that you have the power to convene. And so the president's been having all of these meetings, and tomorrow his Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, General Kelly, is going to meet with a group of mayors. And I wish I could be there because it's quite a diverse group. It's not everybody from sanctuary cities, or it's a real mix. And they're going to be talking about the executive order on immigration and sanctuary cities. So the power to convene, at least to get people talking, is one of the best things they could do.
All right, we got to go. President Trump fulfilling another campaign promise today, this time undoing President Obama's climate change agenda. Details coming up.
All right, this afternoon, President Trump signed a new executive order, this one rolling back his predecessor's efforts to combat climate change. The order dismantles a number of Obama-era environmental regulations, ones, he says, have hurt oil drillers and coal miners.
The action I'm taking today will eliminate federal overreach, restore economic freedom, and allow our companies and our workers to thrive. The miners told me about the attacks on their jobs and their livelihoods. I made them this promise. We will put our miners back to work. With today's executive action, I am taking historic steps to lift the restrictions on American energy, to reverse government intrusion, and to cancel job-killing regulations.
These regulations, they are job killers, but I'm not a Bob killer. I want to know exactly how you feel about the president's promise. West Virginia, coal miners in Pennsylvania and other areas of the country, they are eagerly awaiting this great news that their jobs will be returned.
Have you ever seen them take off the top of a mountain to get coal and send it all down into where the creeks are and it all backs up and people lose their houses? Probably not.
You're talking about mountaintop mining.
But let me put it this way. The one thing about climate change that most, even the amateurs he listens to, will agree that the sea levels are rising. The first place I hope drowns is Mar-a-Lago and all of his billionaire friends. The idea that you would send this thing back, yes, there's some things that are overreach. I agree with that. But for the most part, they are not. We've worked hard to have this. Every year, the Republicans want to do away with Clean Water and Clean Air Acts. They don't get away with it. And the reason for it is they usually live in nice places and better houses and never been around a poor person who lived in a place where they could get. Yeah, name me one. Name me one.
Chuck Schumer is yelling at people at the
what are you
most
talking
expensive
about?
cash-only Italian restaurant in the city.
Name me a Republican around Trump that lived in a poor.
Climate change is about cost versus reward.
I see.
Are you willing to spend $1 trillion a year over a century to reduce the temperature by a fraction of a degree, a fraction that actually might be beneficial to the people you don't know in other countries? By the way, a slightly warmer climate, Bob, is beneficial than a slightly colder climate. You will save hundreds of thousands of lives a year with a slightly warmer climate. There's your fact.
Who's the quack you used to listen to? We used to have on here all the time. The loudmouth that never went to college. The climate change guy.
What are you talking about?
He wrote a book. I mean, anyway.
That was really remarkably intelligent.
You're not talking about Al Gore, who promised that New York City would be underwater by 2015 due to climate change and the rising sea levels.
No, I'm not talking about that.
He did go to college. All
right, but let's talk about
$1 billion.
Let's talk about some of the president's promises. He said that we're going to have fewer regulations and a cleaner environment. Is it possible, Eric, to have both?
Yes. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I think listen, here's what Bob is eliminating the other part of the equation, where when you do eliminate some of these regulations or restrictions, you open up the oil industry, which happens to provide millions of decent to high-paying jobs for people who need jobs right now. That's what this is all about. It's right, keeping the cost of energy down, but it's also one of the most employed industries.
But Bob's got a job in TV. He doesn't care about them. He's got a job in TV.
I have to think the oil industry does a very good job, moves a lot of product every day.